Good morning. How's everybody doing? Thanks for being patient. It is never easy getting on these calls. I will admit that fully, as I have before, whether it's 8 in the morning on a Friday or 4 o'clock on a Monday. Inevitably, I find that I'm letting somebody down by getting on these calls. I've been kind of getting some last minute athlete texts who have upcoming events and races and whatnot. And that always takes priority for me beyond pretty much all else. But Zoe is sick, unfortunately, so she will not be here today. But yeah, excited with Kristen and Kylie and Drew and Sarah that we should have a great call. We've got some really good questions. So thank you for those people who sent in some questions this week, because we are the question archives are empty. I have every single question that has been sent. That's all we've got. So if you have a training question that is just like on your mind right now, please feel free to send us an email over the weekend, and we will add it into, I'm not sure if we're doing calls next week. I have to check my planner because we have family in town. We can add it to next Friday's call. So yeah, thanks guys. Cool. Well, let's jump into it since we're behind schedule. Where to start? I should probably start with the warm-up question. Okay. This is a question about cross-training and strength training. I know some strength training is good for athletes, but how much upper body strength should a runner be doing? Good question. I don't know if any of the other coaches want to start with this one, or I can definitely
say I don't necessarily have like a routine for my athletes and strength training as it pertains to upper body. I like to incorporate calisthenics and plyometrics into weekly routines to make sure that core strength is, generally speaking, strong and capable. Again, not so much to make you stronger, but to help decrease the likelihood or chances of injury. Injury mitigation is huge, and so that's a big deal. As it pertains to like lifting weights and being a stronger runner, I mean, everyone's going to have their own opinion. So hearing from other coaches is good too, but I feel like the faster or shorter distances, you maybe benefit from a lot of those stronger, like upper body. Not to say that you're like, I got to do back and shoulders today and then chest and abs tomorrow and then legs on Wednesday. It's not like that. But generally speaking, in my experience, longer races have less need for upper body strength training. Shorter, faster, more intense races, maybe an increased need for strength training. But I digress. I want to hear someone else talk about it.
Drew, I love you, but I disagree. And the reason I disagree is I think that like your full body needs to be strong and able to overcome injuries, because even though you're just running with your legs, like you're using your whole body to move through the mountains, or if you're running the shorter, faster stuff. As a college athlete, we lifted 3 to 4 times a week. As you know, an elite athlete now, it's still 2 to 3 times a week. And it's not all just lower body. I think that a lot of times people think that like the running takes care of everything. And that's definitely true to a point with lower body strength training. But if you're doing injury mitigation, if you're doing like monster walks, like side to side shuffles, band work, body work, things like that, those are all really important things. You don't need to be like maxing out on like what your hamstring curl is. Like that's things like that are silly, but core, upper body, back, lower back are all just as important to me as, like the 20-mile long run I did in the mountains. So I think that for my athletes, I usually send them sort of like a cheat sheet that my coach has sent me. And we talk about this too. I know that there's a strength training coach, like partner that we use with Microcosm. And I have a friend who is also a strength coach in Boulder that I've been working with for the last 3 years. And I think it's a matter of just talking to your strength coach and your running coach with what your goals are. And, you know, our job is to help you achieve those goals. But I definitely think that it's important to feel strong, to work on mobility and stability, especially because if you're running on trails, your body's not always going to be hitting the same angle of, you know, road, pavement, trail, whatever, at the same time. There's turns, there's ups, downs, there's technical stuff. There's just always going to be something that if you do nothing, you're more likely to get injured, but there are definitely ways to alleviate that.
Yeah, great. I think you guys both have, really great viewpoints on this. Again, you know, like a good athlete is a balanced athlete. So you can't let upper body strength go completely out the window. But I also I think that there's, for some people, a huge overemphasis on cross training and getting into the gym. I do very little strength work and have a lot of running success. So it really depends on the athlete, your athletic background. I've been an athlete my entire life. So, you know, I was talking about this with Zoe yesterday. She's like, you do so little strength, but you're so strong. And I do so much strength and I'm, you know, not as strong as you. And it has to do with genetics and your background. And so each person is very individually different. So the individual needs, they really vary. I do think, you know, there are big gains to be made for some athletes in focusing on some strength work. But kind of what underlies all of this, at least for me as a coach, is wanting my athletes to be balanced. You know, there are a lot of kind of little things that happen to runners who don't do strength, injuries, and it can be a variety of things, you know, like if you're not doing core strength, that can lead to an injury. If you're not doing, you know, some lower body strength, that can lead to injury or maybe a loss of running economy. And the upper body is the same way. So although I don't, you know, I would prefer people run rather than strength train. And I think that there is a strong overemphasis on getting a few extra percentage points in terms of like training. Athletes tend to overemphasize these really small things that they think are going to lead to these big performance gains. And in most cases, you're better off just resting or actually running consistently. That's really going to give you some success. To get an upper body strength in, you can literally just do core and push-ups after your run. You don't have to do much more than that. Some athletes, they really want to do more, and that's really great if it fits your schedule, your lifestyle, and your background, and it doesn't come at the expense of running 5 days a week. Of course, if you have an injury and you go to a PT and they tell you that you need to work on X, Y, and Z in order to prevent that injury from reoccurring, you know, those interventions are really, really important to kind of, think about. But primarily for runners, you know, it's a lot of lower body strength and core work, and then just kind of maintaining the upper body. Specifically, you know, what I see in athletes is, especially athletes who run up mountains, is this, the gravity eventually kind of hunches everybody over. And so making sure that the back is really strong, so that way you can support yourself when you're climbing, so you can wear a pack and it doesn't kind of like over time tilt you over and restrict your diaphragm and your airway, which can lead to feeling a little bit like you're not so getting enough air, like you're maybe a little out of shape. And that's just because you're not getting full breath of air in because you're constantly forward. So there are some things that you can work on. Push-ups and band work seem to, really be all you need. But again, for the individual, sometimes, a little bit more or a little bit less on either end of that can be really helpful. Yeah. Wouldn't overemphasize it. Wouldn't do it to the detriment of your running training. But again, a balanced athlete is going to be a healthy, successful athlete.
Yeah. And I also think that like, this is one of those things that we talk about that is so easy to overanalyze and overthink and overcomplicate. Like, do some push-ups or pull-ups after every run, do some planks, do some abs, do what feels good. Don't make it so complicated that it seems overwhelming, because it's really not. It's maybe, sometimes we're asking athletes to do mountain legs or speed legs after some of their easy runs or even after a workout, but it doesn't take more time than that to do, 3 sets of 10 push-ups.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have a strength coach that I've consulted with, over the last 6 months. My strength work is like 2 20-minute sessions a week. It's very simple. It's four like exercises. Plus, I do, 4 to 5 minutes of core and very light push-ups after each run. I tend to not do too many push-ups because it causes my back to hurt. So, you start to learn what works for you and you stick with it, and consult experts. Without experts, you're kind of just making uneducated guesses. And that's not great with training, especially for runners. Like, you really want to be specific and know what you're doing. Awesome. Yeah, let's move on to some other questions here. Yeah, this is one we've actually done a couple calls on, but I feel like is always good to kind of come back to. I've heard there should be a clear goal for each run we do. Would you discuss the goals for each of the kinds of runs you put on our plans? Recovery, easy, hills, strides, long run. I know there are a little bit of this stuff on the effort guide, but please go over it again. Okay. Please refer to the call we've already done. No, just kidding. We'll make it really simple. Long run, hills, strides, easy run. I'm not even going to maybe include the recovery run, because I think over time I've seen that recovery runs are great, but sometimes are not also great for athletes who are developing running economy, because it leads to too much plodding and shuffling, and that's not good for neuromuscular development. So let's leave that out for today and just go easy, hills, strides, and long runs. Yeah, Drew, you want to talk about the purpose of the long run? I feel like you've articulated this really well before.
Yeah, so the long run in my eyes is one of the most, if not the most important run of the week. This is one that not only increases, like you talk about, increase in VO2 max and adaptations on the body, physiological adaptations as they pertain to muscular use and all that. But I'm a big mental proponent, and I feel like your long run is an opportunity for you to practice ultimately you're practicing your race. And so when you go into, I guess, the goal, specifically staying on topic here, the goal of the long run can change depending on what your coach wants you to do. If you're doing any like interval related stuff or tempo stuff in your middle of your long run or whatever it is, but the goal of that long run is to ultimately make your end goal of your race feel doable, feel achievable, not feel overwhelming. And yeah, I mean, I always tell my athletes, like, we do like our hill runs or our speed workouts or whatever sometimes earlier in the weeks. And then we give ourselves plenty of rest before our long run, leading up to our long run, so that you can nail your long run. If you want to have a bad recovery run or have a bad hill repeat workout, you know, that happens. I get it. But we really want to try to do everything we can to make sure that that long run is good, that you hit your desired paces, you hit your desired distance, and make sure that you know, going in and coming out of that long run, that you're confident and strong and ready for, I guess, whatever comes the next week.
Yeah, awesome. Kylie, maybe you can kind of chime in with some of the kind of metabolic adaptations and like race day dress rehearsal as it pertains to fueling on the long run.
Yeah, I think and this is something, you're right, we did talk about this before in regards to when you are doing your long run day. I always tell my athletes that I'm working with that you want to treat that like it's like your dress rehearsal for your race, especially with your gear, your nutrition. So the nutrition piece, the more that you're able to mock or utilize the things that you're planning on using for race day, the better gut adaptations can occur. So if you're able to kind of nail that fueling, the fluid pattern, intake pattern, electrolyte intake pattern, your calorie intake, experimentation with different foods. Once you figure out like what you feel like is going to work for you, and I suggest using a product at least for 2 to 3 long runs, then I recommend sticking to that same plan every single long run that you're doing. And again, that's going to allow for adaptations to occur, and then also for you to feel like, okay, I feel confident with this fueling plan that I have going. Obviously, if you're doing a 50 or 100 miler, you're not going to be doing a 50 or 100 mile training run. So it can be difficult. Sometimes people have a hard time grasping like, oh, well, what do I do in this situation? Because my gut hasn't experienced this 50 or 100 miles. Really, again, like I said, if you're doing your long training runs with the fuel that you plan on using, that's pretty much the best you're going to be able to do. So if you, you're never really going to be able to simulate that race day experience. So yeah, just taking the time to use that long run as a dress rehearsal and kind of put your things together and practice them, and then make sure that you feel comfortable and confident, and everything that you're using is practical as well.
That's awesome. Man, so important. And that long run, again, some of the adaptations we're getting there, it's all about race preparation. This is a primary driver for aerobic adaptation. It's your longest run of the week. So it's for 99% of people, you're spending almost that entire run below aerobic threshold. So angiogenesis, building denser capillary beds, really working on the aerobic system, building efficiency. Those are all the kind of adaptations you're going to get, a little bit of fatigue resistance towards the end of those runs. And what I really like to see from my athletes is those long runs should become more like progression runs, where that first hour really needs to be relaxed. Don't go out too hard. This is something we saw a lot this summer, especially in the heat. Athletes weren't, really judging their effort very well. And they weren't thinking as much about the environmental factors that were going to lead to really slowing down later in those runs. So what I really want athletes doing is thinking first hour, really, really, really relaxed, like a step or two back from what you feel is easy. And then from there, progress the run forward and try to finish those long runs with your best miles at the end. Coming in completely depleted, dehydrated, underfueled, going to the mental and emotional and physical well, that is not advantageous. That can lead to regressions in your training. And it can make it a lot harder to motivate to want to get out the next day. And so many of you guys, like, man, I love seeing all your faces and getting all the names here. And like, I'm just like, I can connect all the dots. It's like, you're running 100, you're running 100K, you're running 50 miles. You know, you guys are 100. You guys are like gonna have to do back-to-back long runs. So if you finish the Saturday long run and you went to the well, it's going to be so much harder for you to do your run on Sunday. And it might not be as physically demanding, but you might not just want to do it. You might not feel motivated. So the reason why I like athletes to think about these like long run progressions, first hour, really easy, then gradually build so your best miles are at the end, is so you feel fired up after, happy with your effort, and you can take that and take it with you out on the next run. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about easy runs and like hill strides and fast strides, which are always kind of other than the workout day, that's kind of like the bread and butter of what we do. Kristen, you want to talk about easy runs?
Yeah, I love easy runs. I think easy runs are just as important as all of these other runs that we're talking about. They're just as important as speed. They're just important as nailing your long run. Because your body needs that active recovery. It needs time to rebuild the muscles that have been like the muscles and the tissue and the fibers has been breaking down over the course of your training. And I like to tell my athletes, like, if you cannot belt out Adele at the top of your lungs, maybe not the top of your lungs, or like sing Hamilton show tunes, or, you know, Under the Sea, it's just whatever songs, like, have fun with it, but also like, you should be able to hold a conversation. It should feel easy. You shouldn't finish an easy run in a bad mood. Like, there's no reason for that. You shouldn't finish an easy run feeling fatigued at all. Like, it should just be, it's maintenance, and it's important maintenance. So I think run as slow as you possibly can without walking, and pay attention to form is my small. That's all I have. I don't know.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, don't overcomplicate your easy run. You know, keep it simple. That's kind of the philosophy behind this. Like Kristen said, you know, it's a lot of maintenance miles, you know, a lot of aerobic development on those easy runs. Really, again, try not to go to the well on an easy run. If you're pushing and stretching to get that like upper edge of your mileage range, a lot of our athletes are prescribed like a mileage range, like 4 to 6 miles. If you're stretching yourself on 6 miles every single day, you know, some days you might want to just run 5 or 4, because the more often you do that, the less kind of correlation you're building to like with these the positive notes that should be highlighting these runs. You might be inadvertently and kind of subconsciously creating a negative association with the runs. And then over time, that eventually leads to symptoms of burnout and stuff. So like, just know that mileage range is totally legit. Like, we don't expect you to hit the upper edge of the mileage range every time. We want you to run 4 miles if you're tired, 4 miles if work is really hard. If you're feeling great, run 6 miles. It's really important as an athlete over time to embrace the mileage range. And again, like Kristen said, you know, it's all about running easy. Should feel really, really effortless out there. You can't run your easy runs too easy. I think the one caveat to this that I've been seeing in coaching with my athletes is that if you are running really, really slow and not paying attention to like light, quick strides, you end up plodding out there, and that isn't advantageous to building the neural pathways we need to becoming more efficient runners. So when you're going really slow, and I think about this all the time in my own training, because I like doing my easy runs really slow. But I'm always focused on like some of those basic things in form: standing tall, pelvis forward, really light and quick strides, no long strides, no plodding strides with a lot of ground contact time, keeping it quick.
I also
That really is important. Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
sorry, TJ. I also think it's like, trying not to overcomplicate this at all, but it's like you take your car in for maintenance every 3,000 miles, right? Like you should be treating your body the same way. And to me, doing that, like practicing some self-compassion, like having a self-love day, like it's like a treat yourself day, like go for an easy run, eat some ice cream, like enjoy your life. It's not rocket science, it's running.
I really like
Yep.
Kristen's idea, or like the term active recovery. I feel is so important to understand what that is. Those easy runs aren't, I guess, adding, stressors and inflammation of the body so much as it's helping work a lot of that out. I like active recovery days, using those as like getting ready for like an actual rest day. So not to tie it back into long runs, but you do a long run, your next day oftentimes is an easy, slow, relaxed, easy run, so that maybe the next day as your off day is more beneficial, physiologically speaking.
And also, it's a great primer too, which is why, we run easy the first day of the week. We start to reinforce the neural pathways that maybe kind of got a little stagnant or kind of went to sleep on your rest day. And that primes you for a better workout the following day. And so, we often do hills and strides on those easy days because, again, that reinforces kind of that neuromuscular stimulus that we want, that helps lead you to having quicker, lighter, more efficient strides when you're running easy. And it helps to maintain the adaptations that we created before through workouts and through the hills and strides that you've done before. Would one of you guys like to talk about the hills and strides briefly?
Sure. I think with hills and strides, I think the real key is to maintain your form and your posture. Specifically on strides, I think that's really important. And we've talked about that. There's a blog post about form and posture and running that we can refer back to. But one thing that I like to tell my athletes when they're doing either like a hilly training block or a lot of hill strides is think of them like think plyometrics, right? Like you're going uphill, use your body, lean forward. Think of doing high knees or some sort of plyometrics while you're going up to ensure that you're not breaking down, your form's not breaking down.
Yeah, that's
like
awesome.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I agree completely with Kristen. Amazing. But also I like to mentally think of strides and hills as kind of like, almost like they're strength workouts in a way. Like it's almost akin to doing an actual weight workout, doing like a hill workout. And so there's a lot of strength, both physically and mentally, that come from being able to complete efficiently hill workouts or strides.
Yeah, I mean, it's the bread and butter really of what we do. It's so important, particularly, the hills. Great opportunity for building strength. We don't have to overemphasize strength training all the time because when you're doing your hills, there's so much resistance on the body due to that grade, due to gravity. And you are building a tremendous amount of strength there. And that's often why, you see a tough but short, 2 minutes of intensity hill workout on Tuesday, followed by like a lot of speed on Wednesday. And because we really want to, over time, translate the strength and the power that you develop on that hill into smooth speed on the flats, and improved economy over time, which is going to allow you to then climb better and to run better in more technical terrain because you get more out of every step. I feel like we've done a good job describing this. If you guys have any, further questions about hills or strides, we have written about this on the blog. I would encourage you guys to use the existing resources. But yeah, can always fire off specific questions in the email. Not sure if Kylie, you wanted to add anything. Okay.
I was going to say one more thing is studies have been done recently that have shown like up to a 90% correlation between speed work and hill work. Like they work together into your training. So when we prescribe, 5 by 30-second hills or 5 by 20-second hills, and then have a speed work the next day, know that that's because those things work together for the long-term process.
Yeah, totally. They absolutely do. And also, for athletes, I love the hill. For athletes coming back from injury, the hill really reduces a lot of impact forces. It's perfect, right? Like you can build a lot of strength in a and speed in a really safe way. And so, for a lot of athletes that I work with, you're coming back from injury, like almost every workout for many weeks and sometimes months, depending on the athlete, is on a hill before we, move to flatter terrain. And I like to do the progression where, steeper hill, 6 to 8% grade, and then, slight hills, and then to the flats, to get that kind of musculoskeletal adaptation process going. All right, let's talk about, some stuff on the mental and emotional side of training. How can you turn a training block that didn't go as planned into a positive race experience? Such a good question. Who would like to? I can dive in, but I would love to hear from you guys. Drew or Kylie, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about how to frame this question, because oftentimes training blocks don't go perfectly. There's a lot that you can look back on throughout a training block and feel like you could have done better, and maybe feel like you're not quite as ready as you should be leading into your race. And I think before your race, it's important to kind of reflect on the pros. Like, what did you get out of your training block that will help you? You didn't just do nothing, right? And so trying to reframe, I know we talk about reframing a lot. It's an incredibly important piece of training, but trying to reframe your training block that didn't go maybe perfectly as planned, to understand like what you're going to be capable of, and what you can expect, or change your expectations rather, for your race experience, so that it is more positive. I love to hear from other people, but I feel like I'm missing a huge part of this, but really it's understanding that your race goals and your race experiences are completely dependent on you. You have full control over your goals, which can and maybe should change over the course for the better or worse. But then also your race experience, I feel, is a complete mental, emotional part of this. And that is completely, like, you own it. Like, if you want to have a good experience, you need to have a good experience. But what do you think, Kristen?
I totally agree with you. I love that you brought up the point that, like, you didn't just put in all this training and, whether it went well or not well, like, you still got something from it. So I like to tell athletes that, like, have a mantra, go in with a mantra, go in and have fun, because this is why we're here. This is what we're doing, like, this is what you came for. And I think that anytime that you're sort of doubting yourself leading up to a race, it's unfortunate, because there are so many things that you've done to get to the starting line. Like, showing up at a starting line is courageous AF, no matter what distance it is. Like, racing is hard, it's scary, it's something that we all have experienced before, so we know how those feelings sort of like come together over time. But I think that the fact that you are able to run, that you are healthy, that you are not injured, those are three really amazing things that not everyone can say. And one thing that I have been told is that, during long runs, like, it's going to suck. Like, that you understand that, whether not all of it's going to suck, obviously, but whether you're running a half marathon and you get to mile 8 and you're like, oh my gosh, you're questioning every single life decision you've ever made up to that point. Or you're mile 42 in a 50 miler, or mile, 79 in a 100 miler. Like, there's going to come a time where you start to question yourself. But I think that in those moments, it's important to look up, like eyes off the trail, up around you, make sure you're taking it all in, because that's what you signed up for, not just to feel great or say that you finished 100 miles, but to experience the process of finishing 100 miles or finishing a half marathon. And that's just part of the process. Like, you have to get through those low points to experience the peaks of it all. And I think that I say this a lot, but it's like, you can sit in the suck, but you don't have to live there. And so taking that into account, like, expect it to hurt and expect everything to go wrong, but before the race, plan accordingly so that you know how you want to react, and how you're going to adapt in those situations where things don't always go your way. And one thing that I also tell myself is like, when everything is going to shit, I have a friend who used to tell me all the time, like, the great ones adjust, like, be one of the great ones, adjust, adapt on the fly. That's all we can do. And also just like, be kind, it's not someone else's fault. You tripped on a route and, fell at mile 2, but you can still encourage those people. So I think that I have a lot of opinions about this, and I don't want to keep rambling. So
You're doing so awesome though.
Sorry.
Kylie.
I think one thing that I work with a lot of people on is remembering your why, and kind of going back to that, especially if things are going not as planned, and especially with running, nutrition, whatever people are working on. Oftentimes I'll have athletes that I'm working on nutrition wise write a letter to themselves at the beginning of the time that we're working together, that they can look back on and kind of see like how far they've come and why they actually are starting this journey. And doing something like that for yourself, just as a constant reminder, like, things aren't going to go perfectly, and there's always going to be challenges that you have to overcome. So you have to figure out, like, how am I going to frame this? How am I going to adapt? And then if things get hard, what can I kind of remind myself of? And then when you're, if things don't go as planned, kind of like Kristen and Drew were saying, like, focus on what did go well, and don't dwell on those like negative things and negative thoughts going into a race. I think like where your mindset is at, then that's kind of how going to determine maybe like your performance and how you're feeling during that race. So try to focus on those positive things, even if they seem like, oh, that's not that big of a positive. So the focus on the positives, then go back to the why and kind of go from there. That's how I like to frame things.
Yeah, that's really nice, Kylie. I think that that's so important. Remembering the why is a huge part of this. I think, sometimes too, we need, as athletes who are running and doing really tough things, whether it's embracing like your first ever 10K, or trying to run, whatever, your first ultra, you need to be in a place of acceptance when you get to the start line of your race, because no matter how good you get at this, no matter how many years you put in, it's always going to be hard. I always liken this to hills. The hills aren't getting any easier, athletes say. Well, right. It's because you're getting faster. And so your effort level is always going to be at a hard 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 on your hills. So it's never going to feel easy. You're going to just get more accepting of that. You're going to be able to kind of work on those hills from a place of, I know this is hard, but this benefits me. And if you are going into your race thinking anything but this is going to be hard as hell, you're in for a really rude awakening. And the same thing applies for a training block. We're giving you work that is not there to, pat you on the back and say you're super fit. It's there to say, to provoke fitness. It's there to help you get fitter so you're more equipped on race day. So evaluating kind of your thought process behind like this training block didn't go well might be beneficial. Why do you feel like it didn't go well? Was it because you were unable to be consistent? That's something that, maybe it needs to be worked on going forward. Or was it like your long runs didn't feel as good as you were expecting? So you're feeling a little less confident going into your race, or, you had some niggles come up. So like we weren't able to do as many workouts. There are so many things that can happen that could, say to an athlete, have an athlete say to a coach, I didn't feel like this training block went well. Accentuating any positives in that moment is going to be really beneficial. Again, this kind of can go back to that deep thinking stuff that we've talked about in the last couple of calls. Like the onus is on you as the athlete to sit down for a few minutes and try to non-judgmentally think about how that training block went. If you need to write it down, take a sticky note and write down some of the positives. Maybe there's some misses along the way, but for the majority of people, you tend to overemphasize the one or two things that didn't quite go right in a training block, rather than look at all of the little things that added up to actually create a really good training block and really great preparation for a race. I see that all the time. Athletes second guessing themselves the week before a race, or athletes having little things pop up the week before a race. It's so normal. And so don't feel like, you're alone. Your coaches are here to support you through that. But that's sometimes part of the process. And so, what I really like athletes to do when they're feeling like they haven't done enough is to kind of take a step back outside the training log, write down what went well, what didn't go well, save that information for after the race, and then, either insert that into the training log as part of the race recap, or honestly, it should come after a race recap. Because the race day itself is an important day to look at training wise individually. And then, with your coach, you can talk about, maybe the preparation wasn't quite what you wanted. If it had to do with consistency, how do we get you out there running more consistently? If it had to do with the workouts and the little niggles that came up, maybe we need to talk about tweaking your training volume a little bit so you're running from a healthier place, or maybe it was like work related or stress related. I mean, there are so many reasons why we might go into a race not feeling like we're our best selves. But I think also, there's an important kind of thing in there is that we all sign up to do challenging things. We're all here to grow. And it's through working through some of those challenges and that adversity that we really find out who we are. I know a lot of people here are discovering that all the time by working through the highs and lows in this process. And it's really vital that you give yourselves that opportunity rather than to shut down completely. So like, I really love the stuff that Kristen, Kylie mentioned about staying flexible when you don't feel like things are going right. And if you are second guessing a big goal, I tell this to athletes all the time, never run an ultra unless you're 100% in it. I don't care if you back out the day before. If you're not 100% in it, don't run the ultra, because it's not worth it. It's just not worth it mentally and emotionally. It is so hard to run these events that when you do that to yourself, the likelihood of burnout after is exponentially higher. So if you have a real reason behind not wanting to run, if you're not feeling it, listen to that. There will always be other races and training blocks. I'm not sure if I want to go on to another question, because I feel like this is such a good topic. Kristen, Kylie, Sarah, did you guys have anything else that maybe you might want to add?
I just think it's a good time to think about process-oriented goals. So if you're getting to a start line feeling like, well, maybe I'm not going to have the time goal that I was expecting at the beginning of this training. You can still set other goals around enjoying the day and putting yourself out there and being kind to others and having gratitude and like other things like that can make you feel successful.
Yeah, I think we might have lost Sarah a little bit there, but she's totally spot on with the idea of reorienting and kind of grounding in the process-oriented goals. That is huge. It's something that I've been, telling my athletes lately is that the process-oriented goals really pave the way for performance-oriented goals. And so if you're going into a race and your biggest thing is like, I got to run 2:40 in the marathon, or I got to be under 5 hours in this 50K, you're kind of setting yourself up for a really limited experience if that is your only measurement of success out there. The right way in my mind to approach this is exactly the way Sarah mentioned. It's, I'm going to power hike strong. I'm going to move through the aid stations efficiently. I'm going to thank every volunteer. When I feel bad, I'm going to eat a gel. I'm going to keep my eyes up and my arms tight. Like whatever the things are for you that are really process oriented, that help break the race down, make it super, super small. Those little things, that paves the way for good performance. It's not the other way around, that being tight on your time goal and being strict to needing to like nail these splits every single mile, every single aid station to aid station. That is so performance oriented, so limited that when inevitably things go wrong out there, problems have to be solved, there's adverse moments, you are already so tight in thinking about the performance that is very hard to problem solve and remain flexible. I know that is something that's definitely happened to me at a few races in my past. And I've seen it a lot with, athletes who are really motivated by the results. And sometimes we think our performance leading up to a race and the way that we've gone about experiencing a training block and engaging in that process, sometimes we think that wasn't enough to have this amazing performance. I said, I'm going to go under 5 hours at the 50K, but I don't think my training lines up to that. However, you're self-limiting there and thinking that specific block of training is the only thing that's going to affect the outcome of that race, when in fact it's not. All the training is very cumulative. You've worked hard over many, many years to get to this place. And so, your body knows what to do if you get into the proper mindset before the event. Kylie, Kristen, I'm not sure, did that bring anything up for you guys?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that there's not much more to add to that. I think that it's really easy to overcomplicate things, and I think that taking it one step at a time, trusting in the process, like trusting your coach. That's why we're here, maintaining that level of communication it's only going to benefit you in the short term and in the long term. So, yeah.
Do you guys ever have athletes who ask you to make a race plan, a performance goal oriented race plan for their ultras? And what do you do in that situation?
I've never had anyone ask me for that before. A lot of times,
so lucky.
A lot of times before races, I like to get on the phone with my athletes, either, like the Thursday before a Saturday race, or at some point during race week, I like to talk to the athletes on the phone and just kind of go through like, all right, what's your nutrition plan? What's plan B? What's plan C? And making sure to reiterate, first 10 miles need to be the easiest. You literally cannot go too slow during the first 10 miles of an ultra. And just kind of like reminding them that their training was made specifically for this race, and that, they need to trust in that. They need to trust that this is all part of the process. Good results, bad results, doesn't matter. we're all like, it's like Sarah said, we're all here to learn and grow and experience this amazing community. So taking it one step at a time, thanking the volunteers, you know, encouraging your fellow runners, smiling on every freaking uphill or every mile, you know, just there's a lot of little things that go a long way. And I think that it's helpful to remind athletes of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Kylie, have you ever had an athlete ask you to create a time goal for them in a race?
Yeah, I have had a couple of athletes where we've done that, and it's kind of a projection based on their training, and we kind of give like A, B, and C goals, though, kind of like Kristen was saying. So I don't think it's appropriate to just say like, I have to run this one time, and this is like going to determine whether I'm a good athlete or not. So, you know, I think it can be done to where you like ask your coach, what do you think is realistic for me? And that's what I've done with my athletes, is I can give them kind of an idea of what I think is realistic. And then we have like 3 scenarios. And I usually base that also on like past that specific race, past results, and like where I think they would fit in on the course, et cetera. But, you know, you can't compare weather conditions, all that kind of stuff. Like there's different stuff that goes on, even if it's the same race course. And then kind of like Kristen was saying, I always am on people's case about their nutrition and like, what's your plan? What are you doing race morning, et cetera. So yeah, I have done that to some extent, but, you know, keeping in mind that like part of this is like, this is yours as well. Like you're out there racing. So your coach can give you the tools and you can do the training to gain confidence, but like you're also the racer. So you kind of have to figure out a little bit of like how to do that for yourself. And if you're new to racing, then, you know, you kind of go into it and like coach can give you some tips, but you use that as a learning experience. And then that's the beauty of like continuing to get better and improve yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the biggest part of this. Like your coach can't run the race for you. So my question is, why would the coach give you a time goal? It doesn't really make sense. In fact, I find that in previous experiences, when I have worked with athletes to create time goals and they have fallen short of that time goal, the athlete is much more likely to burn out and for it to be a very quick coaching experience, which I don't enjoy because I'm investing a lot of time in that person's, you know, and improvement and wanting them to develop over many years. So, you know, for me, I often ask the athlete to create, you know, maybe multiple, like an A, B, or C. But I tend to also kind of want the athlete just to come to me with process-oriented goals. Because if your number one goal is the outcome, racing is hard. Ultras are tough. You're really limiting your experience out there. And in fact, I think you could be stifling your potential. I myself don't race at all with the time goal anymore. I used to look at, you know, all my past races, all of my past long runs, get to like, okay, I'm going to be 7:10. That's how fast I'm going to run the Grand Traverse, or 6:30. That's how fast I'm going to run Grand Traverse this year based on the past year or whatever. And it's like, when that happens, you end up in such a narrow frame of mind, only considering the outcome rather than the experience. The joy factor goes down exponentially in that race. And you start to like overthink all of the training and the preparation. The fact of the matter is, in running and in life, you're going to experience way more failures. You're going to go into way more races feeling like you didn't execute the training block perfectly than you are feeling like you executed it like to the max. And that's just because there are so many variables that affect your training, from your life circumstances to little niggles to the weather and all of this stuff. that if you're married to that all the time, you're never going to feel like you're enough as an athlete. It's always going to be about the results. The joy factor is going to go way down, and you're going to forget about like that present moment out there. So I think, maybe just to sum it up and to leave it at this, think about the zero mindset going into all of these events. Understand that your preparation is only as good as it could have been, and everything else has to unfold naturally after that. The training is done when you come to race day. It's up to you to celebrate all the work that you've done. It's up to you to celebrate all of the challenges that you've overcome to get yourself there. That's a choice that you made. Drew, articulated that point really well. But if you go in there with limited expectations, lots of process-oriented goals that keep you engaged in the present moment, you're going to have so much more fun, and you're going to most likely blow your own mind with what's possible out there, because you're not expecting to hit every single split, every single aid station at this amount of time, which is going to eventually lead to this outcome. No, it's all about the celebration. I think that is the most vital thing that you can probably take from this, is even, for high performers who do really well in races, from people all the way who are just running their first 10K. We had an athlete run her first 10K last weekend and totally embody like that idea of the zero mindset, no expectations, let things unfold naturally, accept the work that you've done. This has led you to this point, whether it was the most you could have done or the least, that's not important anymore. What's important is just that experience, that race, having a fun day. Yeah, I think Sarah wrote something pretty good here too. Oh, right, of course. Yeah, and we've talked about like 100-mile crewing and pacing in previous calls. So yes, plans are important. But again, plans should remain flexible. All right, guys, I have to go, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry we ran a little bit over, but hopefully we made up for starting late. We are not going to be here on Monday. We're going to be in New Mexico. So we will see you next Friday. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.